Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Valiant and watched the impossible happen. Space itself seemed to tear open like fabric, and through that wound in reality came ships unlike anything humanity had ever seen. They moved with grace that made human vessels look like flying rocks. The alien ships were long and curved, made of what looked like living crystal that caught starlight and threw it back in rainbow patterns. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," said Lieutenant Amy Foster from her station. Her voice shook just a little. Jake could not blame her. This was the moment every human had dreamed about and feared in equal measure. First contact with alien life. The main screen flickered and showed a face that was almost human, but not quite. The being was tall and thin with skin that looked like polished stone. Its eyes were large and dark, and when it spoke, its voice sounded like music played underwater. "Greetings, people of Earth," the alien said. "We are the Zephyrians. We come in peace and friendship. We have traveled far to meet you." Ambassador Lisa Carter stepped forward. She had spent her whole life preparing for this moment, studying every possible scenario for first contact. Her hands were steady as she activated the response transmitter. "Welcome to our star system," she said. "We are honored to meet you. I'm Ambassador Carter, speaking for the people of Earth." The alien's face showed what might have been a smile. "We are pleased to find such a welcoming species. We have much to offer each other. May we come aboard your ship to speak face-to-face?" Captain Ryan Bell, who stood beside Jake, whispered, "Sir, should we allow that? We know nothing about them." Jake looked at the alien fleet. There were dozens of ships, each one larger than anything in Earth's Navy. If these beings wanted to hurt humanity, they could have done it already. He nodded to Lisa. "We would be honored to host you," Lisa said. 3 hours later, the first alien stepped onto a human ship. The Zephyrian was even taller than it had appeared. On screen, nearly 8 feet high. Its skin really did look like crystal, and it moved with flowing grace. Behind it came 2 others, carrying what looked like gifts. "I am Ambassador Zell," the alien said. "These are my companions, Keth and Moore. We bring gifts of friendship and knowledge." Dr. Helen Brooks could barely contain her excitement. As the mission's leading scientist, she had dreamed of this moment since childhood. "What kind of knowledge?" she asked. Zell gestured to one of its companions, who opened a container. Inside were devices that glowed with soft light. "Medical technology that can heal diseases your people have fought for centuries. Energy systems that can power your cities without harming your world. Knowledge of the stars and how to travel between them safely." The next few hours passed like a dream. The Zephyrians showed holographic displays of medical devices that could repair human bodies at the cellular level. They demonstrated energy crystals that produced more power than nuclear reactors but with no dangerous waste. They spoke of star maps that would open the galaxy to human exploration. "What do you want in return?" Lisa asked. The question had to be asked. Nothing this valuable came for free. "Only friendship," Zell replied, "and cultural exchange. We wish to learn about your art, your music, your ways of thinking. We have found that each species sees the universe differently, and this knowledge enriches us all." Over the following weeks, the Zephyrians established a small station in Earth's orbit. Their ships came and went, bringing more gifts and taking back human art and literature. They seemed particularly interested in human history and biology. Dr. Brooks worked closely with their scientists, sharing information about Earth's ecosystems and human genetics. Lieutenant Colonel Matt Price was one of the few people who felt uneasy about the whole situation. As head of Earth's military intelligence, he noticed things that others missed. The Zephyrians asked very specific questions about human military capabilities. They wanted detailed maps of Earth's cities and industrial centers. When he brought up his concerns at briefings, he was told he was being paranoid. "They're peaceful," Lisa insisted. "They've given us technology worth centuries of human development. Why would you suspect them of anything harmful?" Matt could not argue with the results. The first human patients treated with Zephyrian medical technology were cured of cancers that had been terminal. The energy crystals powered entire cities cleanly and efficiently. The aliens had kept every promise they made. But something still felt wrong to Matt. The Zephyrians were too perfect, too generous. In his experience, nobody gave away valuable things without wanting something equally valuable in return. Cultural exchange seemed like a poor trade for technology that could revolutionize human civilization. 6 months after first contact, the Zephyrian fleet began to withdraw. Zell met with the human leadership one final time. "We must return to our home worlds," the alien explained. "But we leave friends behind." He gestured to the orbital station. "Our diplomats will remain to continue our friendship. We hope to return soon with even greater gifts to share." As the alien ships disappeared into hyperspace, Jake felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. The Zephyrians had changed humanity's future in just 6 months. Disease and energy scarcity might soon be things of the past. But something in Zell's final words bothered him. The alien had said they would return with greater gifts. Jake wondered what those gifts might be and what price they would carry. 2 years after the Zephyrians left, they kept their promise and returned. But this time they brought thousands of ships instead of dozens. Jake Morrison was no longer on a single vessel, but commanding Earth's lunar defense station when the alien fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a swarm of angry wasps. The first sign of trouble was when every communication system on Earth went silent at the same moment. The Zephyrian orbital station, which had been peacefully orbiting Earth for 2 years, suddenly activated weapons that no one knew it possessed. The diplomatic station became a fortress that began destroying human satellites and space platforms with precise energy beams. Admiral Kate Sullivan watched from her command center on the moon as Earth's orbital defenses tried to respond. The human ships that moved to intercept the alien fleet were cut apart by weapons that seemed to bend space itself. Energy beams sliced through the strongest human armor like it was paper. Missiles and kinetic rounds simply vanished before they could reach their targets, stopped by defensive systems that human science could not understand. "All stations report in," Kate commanded, but only silence answered her. The communication network that had taken decades to build was gone in minutes. On Earth's surface, the bombardment began at exactly midnight Greenwich time. The aliens had spent 2 years studying human civilization, and they knew exactly where to strike. Military bases around the world erupted in blue fire as energy beams struck from orbit. The Pentagon, NORAD, and every major command center were hit simultaneously. General Nick Foster was in a bunker beneath Colorado when the world changed forever. The mountain above him shook as alien weapons tried to dig him out. Emergency power kicked in, and he found himself commanding what remained of Earth's military through hardened communication lines that the aliens had not yet found. "Status report," he barked into his radio. The reports that came back painted a picture of total disaster. Naval bases were burning wrecks. Air Force installations had been turned into craters. The aliens had somehow known the location of every important military facility on the planet. But the worst was yet to come. As Nick coordinated the scattered human forces, reports began arriving of alien ground troops landing in major population centers. These were not the graceful Zephyrians who had visited as diplomats. These soldiers were shorter, stockier beings with gray skin and red eyes. They moved through human cities with ruthless efficiency, herding civilians into collection points like cattle. Captain Steve Parker led one of the few military units that managed to respond to the landings. His company of Marines engaged the alien ground forces in downtown Chicago, and what they found chilled him to the bone. The enemy soldiers were not just aliens. They were slaves from other conquered worlds, forced to fight for their Zephyrian masters. They're not even the same species as the diplomats, Steve reported over his radio. These look like they've been fighting this war for years. The battle for Chicago lasted 3 days before Steve's forces were overwhelmed. As he fell back through the ruined streets, he saw the processing centers being set up. Humans were being sorted into different groups, the young and healthy in one area, scientists and engineers in another, children separated from their parents and placed in guarded compounds. Dr. Amanda Clark was one of the lucky ones. If being captured alive could be called lucky, she was taken to a research facility that the aliens had built in what used to be MIT. There, she found herself working alongside other captured human scientists under the supervision of Zephyrian overseers. "You will continue your research," the alien supervisor told them in perfect English. "But now you work for the betterment of the Zephyrian Empire. Those who cooperate will be well treated. Those who resist will join the labor battalions." Amanda discovered that the aliens had been studying humanity for much longer than 2 years. In the facility's computers, she found files detailing 17 other worlds that had been conquered using the same method. The Zephyrians would arrive as peaceful explorers, study their targets for years, then return with overwhelming force. Each conquered species followed the same pattern. The adults were used for labor until they died. The children were raised to serve the Empire. Within a generation, the original culture was completely erased. Humanity was just the latest in a long line of civilizations that had welcomed their own destroyers. The worst discovery came when Amanda accessed the Zephyrian historical records. The gray-skinned soldiers who had conquered Earth were originally from a world called Kalos. 200 years ago, they had been a peaceful farming people who welcomed Zephyrian diplomats with the same hope that humanity had shown. Now their descendants fought as slave soldiers for the empire that had destroyed their ancestors. General Foster's resistance continued from hidden bunkers and mountain caves, but conventional warfare was hopeless. Human weapons could barely scratch Zephyrian technology. The aliens had force fields that stopped bullets and energy shields that deflected explosions. Their own weapons could melt through concrete and steel like butter. But in those dark underground hideouts, something began to change in the human survivors. The reports coming in from the processing centers spoke of systematic brutality that went beyond simple conquest. Children were being conditioned to forget their parents. Adults were worked to death in mining operations. The elderly and sick were simply eliminated as useless. Colonel Steve Parker, who had escaped from Chicago, found himself in one of Foster's command bunkers. As he reported what he had seen in the processing centers, his voice remained steady, but his eyes had changed. The man who had gone into Chicago as a professional soldier had seen things that transformed him into something harder and colder. "They're not just conquering us," Steve said. "They're erasing us. In 50 years, there won't be anything left that was ever human." Around the table, the other survivors nodded grimly. The Zephyrians had made a mistake in their conquest. They had assumed that humans would react like the other 17 species they had destroyed. They had not considered that some species, when pushed to the edge of extinction, do not break down and surrender. Instead, they become something much more dangerous. 6 months into the occupation, humanity learned to hate properly. In the hidden bunkers beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Patricia Lewis worked by candlelight, writing what would become known as Protocol Zero. Before the war, she had been a professor of ethics who taught about the moral laws that separated civilization from barbarism. Now she wrote instructions for abandoning every principle she had once believed in. "If they want to treat us like animals," Patricia wrote in her journal, "then we will show them what animals are truly capable of." The first Protocol Zero operation began at dawn on a Tuesday. Captain Alex Murphy led a team of 12 volunteers toward a Zephyrian supply depot outside what used to be Denver. They carried no flags, wore no uniforms, and followed none of the rules of war that humanity had spent centuries developing. The team had spent weeks studying the alien facility. They knew that the crystalline beings inside were not soldiers, but technicians who maintained the equipment that powered the local occupation forces. Under the old rules of war, such people would have been considered non-combatants. Under Protocol Zero, they were simply targets. Alex and his team had modified captured alien weapons with radiological dispersal devices built from medical equipment salvaged from destroyed hospitals. When the weapons fired, they would not just kill the aliens inside the depot. They would make the entire area uninhabitable for any crystalline-based life form. The attack lasted 6 minutes. When it was over, the depot was gone, and a zone of contaminated ground stretched for miles in every direction. The 12 Zephyrian technicians inside had died in agony as their crystalline bodies dissolved from radiation exposure. Alex felt nothing as he watched them die. The capacity for mercy had been burned out of him months ago in the processing centers. Meanwhile, Dr. Richard Stone worked in a laboratory hidden beneath a destroyed subway station in New York. He had been studying captured alien biology with the focused intensity of a man who had watched his daughter dragged away to a conditioning center. The Zephyrians' crystalline structure made them incredibly durable, but Richard had found their weakness. Specific sound frequencies could shatter their internal matrix like breaking glass. But Richard was not interested in quick, clean kills. He wanted them to suffer the way human children were suffering in the alien camps. So he developed frequencies that would crack their bodies slowly, causing weeks of pain before death. Lieutenant Susan Hayes had once been a communications specialist who helped coordinate rescue operations during natural disasters. Now she used her skills to break into Zephyrian communication networks for a very different purpose. The aliens had a group consciousness that linked their minds across vast distances. Susan had learned to turn that connection into a weapon. She began broadcasting recordings into their networks, audio and video of what the Zephyrians were doing to human prisoners. But she edited the material to make it more horrifying, adding sounds and images designed to cause maximum psychological damage to minds that were not prepared for such brutality. The effect on the crystalline beings was devastating. Their linked consciousness, which had once been their greatest strength, became a highway for trauma and madness. The breakthrough came when Commander Joe Martinez captured a Zephyrian officer during a raid on a transportation hub. Under interrogation, the alien revealed the structure of their command system. The warrior caste, which controlled the occupation forces, could not function without constant guidance from the intellectual caste. They were bred for obedience and could not adapt to unexpected situations. Joe realized that the key to defeating the aliens was not to fight their soldiers, but to eliminate their commanders. He organized suicide attacks against Zephyrian command posts, using volunteers who had lost everything to the occupation. These men and women strapped explosives to their bodies and walked into alien facilities with smiles on their faces, knowing that their deaths would paralyze entire sectors of the occupation force. The aliens tried to respond to the new human tactics, but they were psychologically unprepared for the level of savagery that humanity had embraced. The Zephyrians had conquered 17 worlds using the same methods, and every previous species had fought according to some version of honorable warfare. Humans were the first to completely abandon any pretense of civilization. Dr. Angela Foster worked in the most secret facility of all, hidden deep beneath the ruins of CERN in Switzerland. She led a team of scientists who had reverse-engineered Zephyrian replication technology, but they were not building better weapons or defensive systems. They were creating something that would have violated every treaty of war that humanity had ever signed. The Prometheus virus was a self-replicating nanological weapon designed to corrupt Zephyrian technology from within. It would spread through their networks like a disease, turning their own systems against them. But Angela had programmed it with an additional feature that kept her awake at nights. The virus would not simply disable alien technology. It would cause it to malfunction in ways that would torture the operators before killing them. The first test of the Prometheus virus took place in a captured Zephyrian facility in the Swiss mountains. Angela watched through protective barriers as the nanological weapon was released into the alien computer systems. Within minutes, the crystalline beings inside began screaming as their own equipment turned against them. Their medical scanners began emitting radiation that slowly cooked them from inside. Their communication devices started broadcasting frequencies that shattered their nervous systems. Angela had expected to feel sick, watching intelligent beings die in such horrible ways. Instead, she felt only cold satisfaction. Somewhere in the world, human children were being tortured in alien conditioning centers. Every scream from the dying Zephyrians was payment for those crimes. As the test facility filled with the sounds of alien agony, Angela activated the mass production protocols. The Prometheus virus would soon be ready for deployment across the entire Zephyrian fleet. She knew that once released, the weapon would not distinguish between military and civilian targets. Every Zephyrian in the solar system would die in the most horrible way imaginable. Before the war, the thought would have horrified her. Now it filled her with anticipation. The aliens had taught humanity that mercy was weakness. They had demonstrated that the universe rewarded only the strongest and most ruthless. Humanity had learned the lesson well. Soon it would be time to show their teachers the final exam. The Prometheus virus spread through the Zephyrian fleet like fire through dry grass. Admiral Kate Sullivan watched from her rebuilt lunar command center as alien ships began turning their weapons on each other. The virus had corrupted their targeting systems, feeding false information that identified friendly vessels as enemy threats. Within hours, the mighty Zephyrian armada was tearing itself apart. But humanity did not celebrate the chaos. They had learned that victory required complete elimination of threats. Colonel Lisa Rodriguez commanded the new human tactical units, soldiers who had been trained to think like their enemies and fight without any moral constraints. These units were supported by artificial intelligence systems built from captured alien technology and programmed with one simple directive: ensure the total destruction of all Zephyrian forces. The AI systems had been fed data from the 17 previous worlds that the Zephyrians had conquered. They analyzed every pattern of alien behavior and identified weaknesses that could be exploited. The machines recommended targets and tactics that no human commander would have considered before the occupation. Lisa followed their recommendations without question. Dr. Wayne Johnson had been a pediatrician before the war, dedicated to healing children. Now he led a biological warfare division that created diseases specifically designed to attack crystalline life forms. His laboratories produced pathogens that would have been considered war crimes under any previous human conflict. But Wayne had seen what the aliens did to human children in their conditioning centers. He no longer cared about war crimes. The diseases that Wayne created were not designed for quick, clean kills. They were engineered to cause maximum suffering before death. The pathogens attacked the neural networks that connected Zephyrian consciousness, causing madness and agony that lasted for weeks. When the biological weapons were deployed against alien-controlled areas, the screams of dying Zephyrians could be heard for miles. Captain Maria Santos had discovered something that changed the entire character of the war. Using enhanced interrogation, techniques on captured Zephyrian officers, she learned the location of their breeding worlds, planets where alien civilians lived and raised their young. These worlds were lightly defended because the Zephyrians had never faced an enemy capable of reaching them. The information that Maria extracted revealed that the Zephyrian Empire was not just a military force, but an entire civilization with billions of non-combatant civilians. Before the war, this discovery would have limited human response to military targets only. Now it opened up entirely new possibilities for revenge. Admiral Tony Garcia coordinated the first deep strike missions using captured Zephyrian ships that had been modified with human crews. These volunteers knew they were flying one-way missions to alien worlds light years from Earth. Their orders were simple: eliminate every living thing on the target planets. The ships carried biological weapons, nuclear devices, and other tools of genocide. The first deep strike hit a Zephyrian agricultural world called Zeph Prime. The human crew released modified viruses into the atmosphere that killed every crystalline life form on the planet within days. They then used orbital bombardment to destroy every structure, every piece of technology, and every trace that an advanced civilization had ever existed there. When the Zephyrian High Command learned of the attack on Zeph Prime, they attempted to negotiate. Ambassador Zell, who had led the original peaceful contact mission, sent a transmission to Earth offering surrender and withdrawal from human space. President Ellen Murphy broadcast the human response across the galaxy. Her words were translated into every known alien language and transmitted to every inhabited system within range. "You came to us as friends and revealed yourselves as predators," she said. "You showed us what you do to species you consider inferior. You demonstrated that mercy is weakness and that the universe belongs to those strong enough to take it. Thank you for the education. Now we will show you what happens when you underestimate a species capable of becoming your superior." The Zephyrians tried to rally their former slave species to fight against humanity. Instead, these species began sending intelligence reports to human forces. The galaxy had watched the Zephyrian Empire commit atrocities for centuries. Now they wanted to help destroy it completely. Dr. Carol Thompson led the intelligence division that coordinated with alien resistance movements across the galaxy. She discovered that the Zephyrians had enemies on dozens of worlds, species that had been conquered, enslaved, or threatened by the Crystalline Empire. These aliens provided detailed information about Zephyrian military installations, supply lines, and civilian population centers. The former slaves were eager to participate in the revenge. They volunteered to serve as guides for human strike teams and provided weapons and technology that could be used against their former masters. Some even requested permission to join human military units, despite knowing that humanity's war methods violated every concept of civilized warfare. Commander Gary Nelson pioneered the Scorched Galaxy Doctrine, the systematic elimination of every world that had ever been under Zephyrian control. His teams did not simply destroy military targets or even kill alien populations. They used weapons that would render entire planets permanently uninhabitable by any form of life. Gary's forces deployed planet-killer weapons that cracked continental plates and poisoned atmospheres. They seeded worlds with radiation that would make them deadly for thousands of years. The goal was not just to win the war, but to ensure that no future species would ever be able to use these worlds as bases for aggression. As Zephyrian resistance collapsed across the galaxy, reports reached human command of alien civilians attempting to flee to neutral space. Admiral Sullivan issued orders that there would be no neutral space for Zephyrians. Human ships began intercepting refugee vessels and destroying them without warning. The few Zephyrian commanders who remained attempted one final strategy. They gathered their surviving forces around their original homeworld, hoping to make a last stand that might convince humanity to accept some form of negotiated peace. Captain Diana Moore was chosen to lead the assault on the Zephyrian homeworld. Her fleet carried weapons that had been specifically designed for this moment. Devices that would keep the alien population alive long enough to watch their entire civilization burn. The attack was not planned as a military operation, but as a public execution broadcast across the galaxy. The assault on the Zephyrian homeworld lasted 7 days and 7 nights. Captain Diana Moore commanded a fleet of 200 ships that surrounded the crystalline planet like a cage of death. But this was not a battle in any traditional sense. It was a carefully orchestrated execution designed to send a message to every intelligent species in the galaxy. The human fleet did not open fire immediately. Instead, they began broadcasting recordings of what the Zephyrians had done to conquered species over the centuries. Images of slave markets, processing centers, and conditioning camps filled every communication frequency. The galaxy watched as humanity presented evidence of systematic genocide that had destroyed 17 different civilizations. Diana activated the first wave of weapons on the second day. These were not designed to destroy quickly, but to demonstrate human technological superiority. Gravity manipulators began slowly tearing apart Zephyrian cities, pulling buildings apart piece by piece while keeping the inhabitants alive to watch. The destruction was broadcast across all known communication networks. Admiral Kevin Wright coordinated the overall human war effort from his flagship, the UES Retribution. The ship had been built from a combination of captured alien technology and human engineering, designed specifically for the systematic extermination of entire species. Kevin had once been a man who believed in honor and military tradition. Now he commanded a fleet whose only purpose was genocide. The weapons that Kevin's fleet carried had been tested on captured Zephyrian prisoners to ensure maximum effectiveness. Psychological warfare devices that drove crystalline minds insane. Biological weapons that caused slow, painful death. Energy systems that could torture victims for days before finally killing them. Each weapon had been approved by human scientists who had once taken oaths to preserve life. Dr. Carol Thompson's intelligence network had mapped every Zephyrian facility in the galaxy. Her teams coordinated with rebel groups on dozens of worlds to ensure that no alien escaped the final purge. Former slaves volunteered to hunt down their former masters with an enthusiasm that surprised even hardened human soldiers. On the third day of the siege, Zephyrian leaders attempted to surrender. They offered complete withdrawal from all occupied territories, payment of reparations, and submission to human authority. Their message was broadcast from the homeworld's capital city while buildings burned around them. The human response came from President Ellen Murphy, speaking from the Oval Office while alien refugees screamed in the background. "Surrender is not an option. You taught us that mercy is weakness. You showed us that the universe belongs to those strong enough to take it. We have become strong enough to take everything." Commander Gary Nelson led ground forces that landed on the Zephyrian homeworld on the fourth day. His soldiers wore armor built from alien technology and carried weapons that violated every treaty humanity had ever signed. They moved through the crystalline cities like a plague, eliminating every life form they encountered with methodical efficiency. Gary's troops had been conditioned to feel no emotion during the killing. They had been shown recordings of human children being tortured in alien camps until empathy was burned out of them completely. When they found Zephyrian families hiding in underground shelters, they eliminated the adults and the children with equal indifference. The breakthrough came when human forces captured the Zephyrian Central Database on the fifth day. Dr. Benjamin Clark led the team that extracted information about every alien species in the known galaxy. The database contained detailed files on thousands of different civilizations, including those that the Zephyrians had marked for future conquest. Benjamin discovered that humanity had not been randomly chosen for invasion. The Zephyrians had been watching Earth for over a century, studying human psychology and technology. They had identified humanity as a particularly dangerous species if allowed to develop advanced technology. The invasion had been planned as a preemptive strike against a potential future threat. The irony was not lost on Benjamin. The Zephyrians had attacked humanity to prevent them from becoming a galactic threat. Their assault had transformed humans into exactly the kind of merciless predator that the aliens had feared. On the sixth day, human forces located the Zephyrian leadership in a deep underground bunker. Instead of killing them immediately, Diana's teams used sonic weapons to bring them to the surface alive. The alien leaders were forced to watch as their homeworld burned and their species died. Ambassador Zell, who had led the original peaceful contact mission to Earth, was among the captured leaders. As he watched human soldiers eliminate the last Zephyrian children with cold efficiency, he finally understood what his species had created. Humanity had learned to be everything that the Zephyrians were, but without any of their limitations or moral restraints. General Laura Bennett arrived on the 7th day to oversee the final phase of the operation. Her soldiers had developed new weapons specifically for this moment, devices that could keep the remaining Zephyrian population alive for hours while their cities burned around them. The goal was to ensure that every alien experienced the full horror of their species' extinction. As the last Zephyrian city fell, human forces detected attempts by alien civilians to escape to other star systems. Admiral Wright dispatched hunter squadrons to track down every refugee ship. The orders were clear. No Zephyrian could be allowed to survive to rebuild their civilization or spread word of human methods to other species. The final transmission from the Zephyrian homeworld was broadcast across the galaxy on all frequencies. It showed the last group of alien survivors being herded into a processing center that humans had built from the ruins of the planet's capital. The crystalline beings who had once been masters of 17 worlds were now experiencing the same systematic elimination that they had inflicted on their victims. But humanity was not finished. Intelligence reports indicated that Zephyrian colonies and outposts still existed throughout the galaxy. Admiral Wright began planning the next phase of the campaign, a systematic hunt that would not end until every member of the species was dead and every world they had ever touched was rendered uninhabitable. 6 months after the Zephyrian homeworld went silent, humanity controlled more territory than the alien empire had possessed at its height. But unlike their predecessors, humans had no interest in ruling other species. They had learned that it was much simpler to eliminate potential threats before they could become dangerous. Ambassador Rachel Torres established the new protocols for first contact with any alien species. Her office operated from a space station built in the ruins of the former Zephyrian capital system. The station served as both embassy and execution facility, depending on the species that requested an audience with humanity. The protocols were simple and non-negotiable. Any species that had previously shown aggression toward other civilizations faced immediate extermination. Any species that had collaborated with aggressive empires met the same fate. Only completely peaceful civilizations were permitted to continue existing, and only under strict human supervision. Dr. Benjamin Clark, now head of the Galactic Research Division, implemented systematic studies of every known alien species. His teams used captured Zephyrian databases and intelligence gathered from former slave species to compile threat assessments for every civilization in the galaxy. Those rated as potentially dangerous were added to termination lists. The research division operated like a cosmic census bureau, but instead of counting populations, they were deciding which species deserved to live. Benjamin's reports determined the fate of entire civilizations based on their history, technology level, and psychological profiles. Species that showed any capacity for violence or expansion were marked for elimination. General Laura Bennett commanded the Human Defense Fleet. Ships that patrolled the galaxy not to protect human colonies but to enforce the new order. Her vessels carried weapons that could sterilize entire star systems and crews that felt no hesitation about using them. The fleet's primary mission was to ensure that no alien species ever again developed the capability to threaten human existence. Laura's ships visited systems throughout the galaxy, delivering ultimatums to alien governments. Submit to human oversight or face extinction. Most species chose submission after watching what had happened to the Zephyrians. A few chose resistance and were eliminated so thoroughly that no trace of their civilizations remained. The former, Zephyrian slave species had become humanity's most enthusiastic supporters. Representatives from dozens of worlds sent delegations to Earth, not to negotiate treaties, but to formally request permission to exist in the same galaxy as humans. They offered tribute, intelligence, and absolute obedience in exchange for survival. Captain Alex Murphy, who had led the first Protocol Zero operation, now commanded a sector of space larger than the old Roman Empire. His jurisdiction included 47 star systems and 38 different alien species. All of them lived under human protection, which meant they lived under constant surveillance and absolute control. Alex's sector was considered a model of efficient governance. The alien species under his control were productive, peaceful, and completely subordinate to human authority. They had learned that any sign of independence or technological advancement resulted in immediate military intervention. Species that accepted their status as human vassals were allowed to live comfortable lives. Those that showed ambition were eliminated. President Carl Washington addressed the human population on the 5th anniversary of the Zephyrian invasion. His speech was broadcast to every human settlement and translated into every alien language in the galaxy. The message was clear. Humanity had not chosen to become monsters, but they had learned to be more monstrous than any species that opposed them. We were forced to become the monster that monsters fear, Carl said. The galaxy taught us that mercy is weakness and that survival belongs to the ruthless. We learned that lesson perfectly. Now we are the only species in the galaxy fit to survive. The speech was followed by a demonstration of human technological superiority. New weapons were tested on uninhabited worlds throughout the galaxy, showing alien observers what would happen to any species that challenged human authority. Planets were cracked open, stars were extinguished, and entire solar systems were rendered uninhabitable in minutes. Dr. Wayne Johnson, now Director of Human Biological Security, had developed a new generation of species-specific weapons. His laboratories could create pathogens tailored to eliminate any known form of alien life within days of contact. The weapons were deployed as a precautionary measure on any world that showed signs of technological advancement or military buildup. Admiral Jake Morrison, now elderly and scarred by decades of warfare, reviewed reports from across the galaxy aboard his flagship. Every potential threat had been neutralized. Every aggressive species had been eliminated. Every world that could support dangerous life was either under human control or had been rendered permanently uninhabitable. As Jake looked out at the stars, he reflected on what humanity had become. The species that had once dreamed of peaceful exploration and galactic cooperation now ruled through fear and systematic extermination. They had saved themselves by becoming something that would have horrified their ancestors. But in a galaxy where the alternative was extinction, Jake felt no regret about the choices humanity had made. The Zephyrians had demonstrated that the universe was a place where mercy was punished and aggression was rewarded. Humans had simply become better at the game than anyone else. The final entry in Jake's personal log was brief. They wanted to teach us about survival of the fittest. We learned the lesson perfectly. Now we are the only species in the galaxy fit to survive. Throughout human space, children learned a new version of history in their schools. They were taught that the galaxy had once been filled with aggressive, alien empires that threatened peaceful species. They learned that humanity had been forced to become strong enough to protect the innocent and eliminate the dangerous. The truth about what humans had become was presented as heroic necessity. The galaxy was at peace for the first time in recorded history. No wars raged between star systems. No species enslaved others or committed genocide. The peace existed because humanity had eliminated every species capable of breaking it and controlled every species that remained. In the end, the humans had won the war without mercy by learning to be more merciless than their enemies. They had become the apex predator that no other species would ever dare to challenge. The galaxy belonged to humanity now, and it would remain theirs forever.